This is my presentation on legal and ethical issues in sports science. BASES are the British Association of Sport and Exercise Science, and they are the governing body for sport and exercise science in the UK, and they control all research which is done. They have a code of conduct which all researchers must abide by when doing a study or a piece of research, and the code of conduct includes data protection, ethical clearance, informed consent, professional conduct, competence, and bias. And there are lots of legal and ethical issues that BASES have to deal with, and these issues and categories in the code of conduct ensure the welfare of the researcher and the participants. They ensure that researchers only work in their field of expertise, and they ensure that the reputation of sports science research is preserved and is being upheld. Ethical clearance is a process that a researcher has to go through in order to be able to do his piece of research. So the researcher will fill out a form, an ethical clearance form, and submit it to tutors or a college or school's ethics committee. The committee will look at the research proposal in detail, and if the proposal is okay, the committee will clear the proposal and the research will go ahead. If the committee don't clear the proposal, then the proposal will be sent back to the researcher, and the researcher can redo the proposal and resubmit. Informed consent is a legal and ethical requirement of any research which is done. It can be written or it can be verbal, but it should consist of a detailed method of the research and the process, a disclaimer from any injury, stating that the participants haven't been forced into doing it and that they're doing it at their own will, and it should state that the participants can withdraw from the research at any point they decide. So there are results and things that will happen if a research doesn't work legally and ethically. They can be taken to a tribunal, and this involves going to court, and then the jury will decide, and punishments can come in the form of a ban from research, a fine, or being sued in a legal court for a lot of money. Legal or civil actions, so the researcher can be sued in a civil or a high court, and this will result in fine, suspension, or in serious cases the researcher can be sent to prison. And measures to stop future research, so this can be in the form of a ban, a suspension, or a fine, and it could be a ban for life, it could be a ban for 2 years from research, so that the researcher can reevaluate what they've done. So the scenarios. Scenario 1 is the effect of interval training on blood lactate values. Now in this test, the participants are a team of professional hockey players sprinting 100 metres and then having blood taken, followed by a 45-second rest period, and they are then repeating the process 5 times. The blood is then being tested for lactate levels, and the results are being stored in the computer. However, if the results are stored incorrectly, then there could be a data protection issue, as they could be hacked easily and leaked to the internet. The results could be hacked easily and leaked to the internet, and this would be an issue if it was leaked with the players' names, as it would be available to other teams in their leagues, and they will be able to use the data to see how the competition was performing, and opposition teams could use the data to their advantage to tailor their game plan and training so that they could get a performance advantage over the team participating in the test in matches. And the leaking of this information could lead to the researcher being sued by the athletes and could be suspended or banned from research by BASES. Taking blood for the lactate tests could cause a safety issue if it's not done properly by a qualified professional, so that the blood is being taken in the correct way. Otherwise, injury or harm could be caused to the participants of the test, and if injury or harm is caused, then it could have a detrimental effect on the team's performance in their league or in the test. As if one player was harmed while having their blood taken, the coach could say that they didn't want anyone else having their blood taken because they needed the players to be completely fit for their matches, and the coach could also report the researcher to BASES if it was found that they weren't qualified to take blood, and then they could be called to a tribunal or temporarily suspended from research until the incident had been investigated. A form detailing how the test would be run and specifying that blood would be taken 5 times and that there is a small risk that a scar or bruise could be left as a result of the blood being taken. And the form would need to be signed by both the players and the coaches, because the players are professionals, so would need a coach or a manager's consent for it to happen. And if this doesn't happen, then if this didn't happen and the client got a small injury and the coach wasn't aware that the players were taking part in the test, and all the players went into a training session not being able to use their arms properly and couldn't train properly because of pain, then the coach could report the researcher to BASES for malpractice and not having proper consent, and then the researcher could be banned or suspended. A medical professional should be used by the researcher to take the blood, as it is something that can cause harm if it's not carried out correctly, and as this means there is a higher chance that the test will be, so using a medical professional means that there's a higher chance the test will be performed correctly, and the medical professional will be able to tell the coach and the participants just before the blood is taken that they can withdraw from the test at any point if they're in pain or if they want to for any other reason. Otherwise, the researcher could be reported to BASES by a participant, and they could say that the research wasn't carried out in a professional or appropriate way, which could lead to the researcher being sent a letter of warning from BASES about their conduct and upholding the reputation of sports science. The second scenario is about the effects of punishment on performance of basketball free throw percentages. In this test, 5 10-year-old participants are repeatedly taking free throws and are being given verbal abuse by a coach every time they take a shot, and if they miss a shot, then they are forced to do a lap of the court. And here, psychological safety could be an issue with this test, as the constant verbal abuse and bullying could cause long-term psychological damage to the participants, and if it was later discovered that the test had caused this long-term damage to the participants, then the participants or the participants' families could sue the researcher or report them to BASES. Informed consent could be an issue in this test, as the participants' parents would need to be informed that there is a risk that their child could be psychologically harmed if they participate in the test, and the exact method of the test would need to be on the form, and the parents would need to be told in the form that they have the opportunity to withdraw their children from the test at any time, and if this isn't in the form and this doesn't happen, then the parents can report the research to BASES, and then it would then go to a tribunal, or the researcher could just be banned from research straight away. Ethicality could be an issue in this test, so the researcher would need to get ethical clearance from their uni or college ethics committee. They would need to prove that all equipment and facilities are safe to use, say who their participants were and why they were using that group of people, and have a detailed method which would be sent to the committee for review. The issue would be the group of people being used for the test, as it's easy to cause psychological harm to a young child, and if the committee thought that this was a big enough problem to stop the research happening, then they would tell the researcher and they would have to review their research plan. Data protection could be an issue in this test if the participants' names are published in the finished article, as this would mean that the personal information is available to the world and the parents didn't agree to that in the consent form, and as a result the parent could report the researcher to BASES, and they would be sent a letter either suspending them from research or suspending them, calling them to a tribunal, or saying that the parents are going to sue the researcher. This scenario is about the effectiveness of PNF flexibility training in young gymnasts, and the test involves 10 male and female gymnasts aged between 12 and 14 who will participate in a sit and reach test and will then undertake 6 weeks of PNF training focusing on the hamstrings, and at the end of the 6 weeks they will do another sit and reach test to see whether the training has had the desired effect and made the hamstrings more flexible. An issue with this test could be physical safety due to the fact that stretching involved in PNF training can cause harm and injury, such as a pulled, strained or torn hamstring, which can be very painful and take a long time to heal. And as a result of the injury, the parents of the participants could report the research to BASES for malpractice, and it could result in suspension from research or the researcher being sued. Professional conduct could also be an issue, as during the training the coaches would need to stay professional so that they know what's happening physiologically to the muscles and don't cause injury to the participants. And if conduct is unprofessional, then it could result in an injury, and this would cause the researcher and the coaches being suspended from research by BASES. Informed consent could be an issue, as the parents would need to sign the consent form and need to be made aware that there's a risk of injury to their child. Otherwise, if they got injured during the training, then the parents could report the researcher to BASES, and they could be taken to a tribunal or sent a letter containing a fine. Another issue could be data protection, as the parents will not have given permission for their children's names to be published in the final document. So if they are published, then the parents could sue the researcher and the researcher would be banned by BASES. This scenario is about an investigation into the role of cold vests in aiding recovery from maximal sprint intervals. Now this involves 10 male and female rugby players doing 50-metre maximal sprints and then resting for 1 minute. This will be repeated for 10 times and blood lactate tests will be done. The following day the test will be done again, but this time the participants will wear cold vests during the recovery periods, and this so that will be, and then the blood lactate will be taken again, and the two values will be compared, and then you'll get the answer to the results of the investigation, and you'll find out whether the cold vests do aid the recovery. But the use of cold vests means that safety could be an issue for the researcher, as cold vests could cause harm to the participants, such as hypothermia if they're worn for too long. Another issue could be informed consent, as the researcher would need to inform the participants that they could experience discomfort and possible hypothermia due to wearing the cold vests. Data protection could be a further issue for the researcher, as the participants won't have given permission for their names to be published in the final report. So if this happens, there's an issue with data protection. And professional conduct could be an issue for the researcher in the test, as the researcher would need to make sure that the cold vests were kept cold, and so the test was kept fair, and that the participants were shown how to use and wear them properly. And if there was issues with any of these areas in the code of conduct, then the participants would report the researcher to BASES for malpractice and and poor professional conduct, and this could result in a ban, a fine, or suspension from research. And this is a bibliography for all the pictures that I have used in the presentation.